The war in Ukraine has taken a dramatic turn. Behind closed doors in Saudi Arabia, secretive negotiations are underway between the U.S. and Russia, aimed at securing a ceasefire. But can a deal really be reached when both sides remain deeply divided? And is the U.S. quietly shifting its stance toward Moscow under President Trump's administration? We're breaking down the latest developments, the power plays at work, and what this all means for the future of the conflict. According to Russia's state news agency, TASS, diplomatic talks have resumed in Saudi Arabia. The goal? A ceasefire in the ongoing war in Ukraine. Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, expressed confidence that real progress could be made. But what exactly does that mean? The U.S. wants to establish a Black Sea ceasefire, following a recent statement from Vladimir Putin, who suggested he would order a 30-day pause on attacks targeting energy infrastructure. Just last night, the U.S. delegation met with Ukrainian officials in Riyadh, and Kyiv has described the discussions as productive. However, while Ukraine has agreed to Trump's ceasefire proposal unconditionally, Russia has outright rejected it. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, the fighting continues. Ukraine's Air Force reported that it shot down 57 out of 99 Russian drones launched overnight. The war rages on, and while the U.S. remains optimistic, skepticism runs deep. Security experts warn that a ceasefire, even if achieved, would be fragile at best. Behind the walls of the Ritz-Carlton in Riyadh, negotiators are hammering out the technical details of a potential Black Sea deal, one reminiscent of the 2022 agreement that allowed Ukraine to export grain safely while Russia sought sanctions relief. That deal collapsed when Russia pulled out, frustrated that sanctions relief never materialized. Now Moscow wants it revived as its economy struggles under the weight of Western restrictions. But here's the catch. While the U.S. believes that a successful Black Sea agreement could be a stepping stone toward a broader ceasefire, Moscow doesn't seem eager to halt land combat. Russian forces continue to make slow but steady gains, pushing Ukrainian troops back. For Putin, pausing the fighting at sea while keeping momentum on land seems like a strategic win. Meanwhile, Ukraine's energy infrastructure remains a major target for Russian attacks, and Kyiv remains wary of any promises Putin might make. Ukrainian MP Alexander Merezhko, chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, voiced strong skepticism. He acknowledged that while a partial ceasefire protecting Ukraine's power grid would be a positive outcome, past experience has taught Kyiv that Putin's promises often mean nothing. Putin makes a promise, then violates it immediately, he warned. Adding to the tensions, President Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, has sparked controversy with remarks that some say align too closely with Kremlin talking points. Ukrainian officials are deeply alarmed, accusing Witkoff of parroting Putin's propaganda. Merezhko didn't hold back, calling Witkoff's comments unacceptable and questioning whether he is unprofessional or deliberately advancing Moscow's interests. This controversy highlights a crucial shift. Under Trump's administration, U.S. policy appears to be moving closer to Russia's position. That's a stark contrast to the Biden administration and NATO, which have firmly sided with Ukraine, condemning Russia's invasion as an illegal act of aggression. So where does that leave Ukraine? The stakes couldn't be higher. President Zelensky has made it clear that Putin must be forced to end the war. But how? Kyiv believes that pressure, not negotiation, is the only way forward. More sanctions, targeting Russia's energy and financial sectors. Secondary sanctions to cut off countries helping Moscow bypass restrictions. And of course, continued military aid to Ukraine. The key issue now is whether the Trump administration will fully commit to backing Ukraine or continue to lean toward a more conciliatory approach with Russia. This shift in U.S. policy could have profound implications, not just for Ukraine, but for NATO, the European Union, and global stability. If the U.S. moves away from its traditionally firm stance against Russian aggression, what signal does that send to other authoritarian leaders watching from the sidelines? Ukraine's allies, particularly in Europe, are closely watching these negotiations. While many NATO nations continue to provide military and financial aid, some worry that without firm U.S. backing, their efforts could falter. Additionally, there are concerns that any ceasefire deal, especially one that benefits Russia, could set a dangerous precedent for future conflicts worldwide. At the same time, Russia's internal situation is becoming more complicated. Sanctions have severely impacted its economy, with inflation rising and the ruble losing value. The war effort has also placed immense strain on Russian military resources, with reports suggesting that Moscow is relying on North Korea and Iran for additional weapons and munitions. While Putin continues to project strength, cracks in Russia's resilience are beginning to show. Beyond military and economic concerns, there's a growing question about how the U.S. public perceives this war. American voters have become increasingly divided on the issue, with some arguing that continued involvement drains resources needed at home. The Trump administration's approach appears to reflect a growing sentiment among certain factions that the U.S. should prioritize domestic issues over foreign conflicts. If this perspective gains traction, it could lead to a drastic reduction in military aid to Ukraine, forcing Kiev to negotiate on terms less favorable to its sovereignty. For now, the talks in Saudi Arabia continue. The U.S. is hoping for progress, but Russia remains unyielding. Can Washington broker a breakthrough, or will these negotiations collapse like those before them? And if the U.S. shifts its stance further toward Moscow, what does that mean for Ukraine's future? Stay with us as we continue to monitor the latest developments. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated on this evolving story. What do you think? Will a ceasefire hold, or is this just another diplomatic illusion? Let us know in the comments below.